Austin, such a prosperous community, but one in which the housing problem is really serious. So today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we talk about hands-on housing, a way for us to make a difference for people whose houses really need repair. Stay with us for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you joined us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and today we're talking about ways that we can make a difference in people's lives by making a difference in their housing. And our guest today is Hugh Sparks, the program coordinator for Hands-on Housing. Good to have you here, Hugh.
Glad to be here.
I bet not everybody knows what hands-on housing is. So first of all, tell us that.
Well, I didn't know what it was myself until about 4 weeks ago, at which time I was recruited forcefully to join the board and to join the staff at Hands-on Housing. Hands-on Housing is a subset of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries, and to put that in focus, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is sort of Austin's version of the World Council of Churches. We have Methodists, we have Buddhists, we have Catholics, we have Jewish, we have Seventh-day Horizontalists, we have just a little of everybody out there. But as long as they are faith-based, then they're part of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. And in that organization, we have Hands-on Housing. Hands-on Housing's primary goal is to improve the quality of the housing of people who are unable, either due to physical limitations or financial limitations, to do their own home repair. We're talking your 85-year-old widow in East Austin who just can't pick up the hammer anymore and nail boards in, and she's on a very limited income, but she owns her house, which is one of our criteria. We only work on houses that are owner-occupied. We don't do rentals, we don't do slumlords places or anything like that. You own your house, you live in it, and you meet the federal criteria for being poor, we'll cover you.
Hugh, why is a faith-based organization that could be involved in lots of different kinds of ministries in Austin, why is a faith-based organization doing housing repair?
Why not? There should be no limitations to what a faith-based organization can and should do. Just because we're faith-based doesn't mean that all we can do is go out and proselytize. Hands-on Housing doesn't proselytize in any way, shape, or form. We don't care who you believe in, to be honest. Theology belongs to some other part of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In Hands-on Housing, I'm worried about the quality of the housing. I'm worried about the quality of the relationship between our volunteers and the people whose homes we're helping out. And as much as resolving housing problems, we're resolving community problems. We're trying to get East Austin and West Austin, or is it the other way around, West Austin and East Austin, to bridge that gap called I-35. And when you go in there with a paintbrush and 15 or 20 other friends and help somebody's house, and they're there helping you help them, you have a little trouble feeling like you don't belong over there anymore, or that there's no relationship between you and them. And we're trying to build ideas and heal communities and heal hearts as much as we're healing housing.
Well, I guess then in the best sense of the word, our faith does help us create community. Now, if I recall correctly, we have some photographs so that people can see the dramatic difference that the Hands-on Housing volunteers have made in Austin. So maybe you can talk us through a little bit of this.
We have here a before picture of a house in East Austin that we sent a crew in to work on. And again, most of our crews only work, the majority of the time it happens once in the spring and once in the fall, but we do some things year-round. We have an event coming up we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a before shot of a house that, as you can see, needs some help. It needed some structural work. It particularly needed painting. And I believe the next shot is what it looked like when they got through with it. This is a house that you can feel comfortable in because the inside is as fixed up as the outside is. And we didn't spend much money on this because we had volunteer labor, and Habitat for Humanity does such wonderful things building new homes for people, but that takes many weekends and a whole lot of money. We can go in there with one weekend, not much money and a lot of volunteers, and take an existing house, and rather than losing that part of our housing inventory, fix it up. And instead of doing one home in 4 or 5 weekends, we can do as many as 40 or 50 homes in one weekend.
Got to imagine that makes a dramatic difference for all concerned. Well, that was one example, and I think there's another example of a house.
Yeah, here's another one
Right.
that needed some work, as you can tell. It hadn't been painted in quite some time, and boards were falling off. We sent a group of volunteers in, and the next photo, I think, shows the result was when we got through. A very livable place. Notice our crews even put leaves on the trees. I thought that was rather impressive.
Your crews are good. Very good. So now, people fix up a house. Then what? Because I don't imagine that those same volunteers come back to that neighborhood. What happens in the neighborhood after that, after the crew descends and leaves?
Often, my understanding is that other people in the same neighborhood take pride in the fact they have a very nice looking house, and the idea sort of spreads to other houses, and the neighborhood pitches in and they help revitalize other houses in the same area. We may go into a portion of East Austin, into one neighborhood, and fix up 4 or 5 houses, if there are that many that are on our worst case list, and then the rest of the community and our volunteers coming back on their own may revitalize another 15. So
Now, you've been on the job just a short time, but I wonder if you've heard from any of the volunteers. What happens to them as a result of this experience?
they love it. And that's what's so neat is they get to go out. They don't kill a whole week. They don't really waste any time. They get there and work from 8 to 3 if they're doing a full day, or 8 to 12, or 11 to 3 if they're doing just a half day with one of those 2 shifts. And in that period of time, with 20 people working on one house, you can paint the entire exterior, scrape it and paint it. You can replace rotten boards in the flooring or in the posts on the front porch. We can replace an entire roof in a day. But this is because we have such wonderful volunteers working with us, particularly from the Austin Association of Remodeling Contractors. I think that's their name. I'm so new on the job, I don't know all of the groups yet. My understanding is that they are providing people who go in for free to each of the houses when we've been called saying this house needs some help. And they do an evaluation of how much work needs to be done, what sort of materials are needed, how many sheets of plywood, how many buckets of paint, provide that list to us, and then we find a volunteer group and match them with a house. We take the head of the volunteer group and say, these are the houses we have to deal with. Pick one you think your group can work with. They pick it, and then we find a way of trying to provide the materials. Sometimes the volunteers do it. Sometimes some money comes from some source or other, and we go buy sheetrock and planks and nails and screws and sealer and caulk and things like that. So we need volunteers to wield hammers and paintbrushes. We also need money to go buy these materials. And if you can't provide money and you can't provide a strong arm, at least we're asking for prayers. Because if the people who are interested in this program will at least keep us in their prayers, that kind of good vibes, that kind of good thoughts goes a long way in the community to healing lots of things besides just sick houses.
And what about long term? Some folks might say, well, this is fine, but this is just patching. This is just fix up. This is just short term. And does this really address the long-term needs in the city of Austin for affordable, decent, in good condition housing? Again, you're new, but I wonder what you might say to that, to people who would say, well, hands-on housing is just a piecemeal.
The new houses that people are building in the outskirts of town, because there's no more place in the inner city generally to build, the houses they're building out there cost an awful lot, $105, $125 a square foot these days. People cannot afford to move out of the homes they're in and go anywhere close by public transportation and buy a new house. Habitat's resolving some of that problem by building new homes for people, and that's a wonderful service, but they can't build nearly enough in the space provided. What we're doing is taking the houses that already exist, and rather than letting them completely deteriorate and be removed, we're fixing them up so they have another life of maybe 20 or 30 more years down the road. And perhaps in another 10 or 15 years, another crew will come in and bring it back up to par again. So we're maintaining low-cost, affordable housing in Austin and letting people continue to own their homes and not rent and send the money out of state or even out of the community somewhere. And every penny that's donated to Austin Metropolitan Ministries stays in Austin, because the money we get for buying supplies, we buy from the various people here in, Home Depot, out, north or south. We buy from Calcasieu Lumber, we buy it from McCoy's or whoever. The money is staying here in town, and it's increasing the economy here in Austin the whole time.
Are we, do you suppose then, a model project for other communities in terms of housing
certainly
repair?
Hope so. There's a program that's coming up very soon called Raise the Roof that was begun last year by HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Operation out of Washington. They did this nationwide. Austin jumped on the bandwagon. It was a weekend in October, and they refurbished about 40 homes, I think, in East Austin. This year, so far, Austin's the only city in the country that's doing it again. We're doing it September 9th, so that's coming up real soon, guys. We need to have some volunteers for that, but we're doing it in concert with the City of Austin and a number of other housing organizations, which I probably should list.
Please. So that's the event you wanted to be sure
That's
to
the event
highlight.
I'm here all about, yes, on September 9th. The other groups involved are Austin Habitat for Humanity, the Austin Remodelers Association, Austin Youth Works / Casa Verde, the Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. All of these folks are pitching in. We have meetings every couple of weeks down at City and coordinate all these activities. The city's providing some money to pay for the supplies and materials. The remodeling organization is going out and figuring out what materials we have to buy and getting bids and all that stuff. And Hands on Housing is the primary provider of volunteers that will go out. We have, like, St. Austin Schools providing us 100 volunteers. Age doesn't matter. Hey, we'll take anybody, because we'll have professionals at each location who can coach the people who are doing the work and let them know how to do what they're doing and supervise it.
So this is a call for volunteers, no matter what their background, for prayers, and for financial support, right?
Sure, right.
At least that in a very short time.
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back right after the break and talk a little bit more about the event and some more about the philosophy behind Hands on Housing. I think folks are intrigued with this.
Wonderful.
And we thank you for being here for the first half of Austin Faith Dialogue. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking about needs for housing repair in Austin and talking with the program coordinator for Hands on Housing, Hugh Sparks.
Hi.
Good to have you here. Now, Hugh, during the first half, we began to get a little bit into this special event that Hands on Housing is having at the beginning of September called Raise the Roof, correct?
Right.
I wonder what kind of volunteers you're looking for. And we've got some pictures of previous volunteers also that'll give people an idea of who should come out.
Well, here's a group that was working on a house, and you can see they've already scraped down the side of this house. And but it's also, typical of our volunteer groups. It's multi-ethnic, and by golly, they're having a good time. You can just see the faces, and these are people that are enjoying themselves. The next photo, I believe, is a couple of kids from, I don't recall which church they were from, but they were from one of our church communities in AMM. And as young as they are, they were doing a great job painting a house. So we have no limitations on size or age. We do have the professionals who will be there helping to coach people and instruct them on what to do.
So you're saying that people who have no previous experience and really aren't even much good, even with a paintbrush, but show up, there's something that they can do?
Absolutely. If nothing else, there's cleanup in the area of the yards, maybe. There's some gardening work. I would love to see every one of these houses wind up having a nice garden set up in the front, just something to make it more like home and a place that you're happy to spend time in as opposed to dreading having to go home.
Well, now we've talked about the needs for housing and we've seen the outsides of some houses. How bad is housing in Austin? What can you show us that shows how bad?
Here's one picture. This is a sort of a close-up of a bathtub in a corner. You can't really tell from the floor there, but most of the ceiling has fallen down and is laying on the floor. Obviously, it needs a paint job. It needs some wood repair. It needs floor repair. It's hard to live in a house in these kind of conditions and feel good about it and to have pride in yourself and in your home. And these are the situations we try to rectify. So far, I don't have an after picture of this shot, but perhaps we'll have one after the event coming up on September 9.
I hope so, because I imagine a lot of people will be surprised to find that in Austin, Texas, prosperous as it is, a lot of folks simply don't have standard housing.
We have approximately 100,000 people in Austin living in substandard housing. And that means they may not have operational bathrooms or operational kitchen facilities. 100,000 people. It's going to take, that's not 100,000 houses, that's 40,000 roughly. We can't do 40,000 houses in a weekend. We'd love to, but we can make a step in that direction. But it's going to take a concerted effort over a long period of time for us to address all of these needs. Somebody has to do it, and Hands on Housing under Austin Metropolitan Ministries at the moment is the primary force in Austin that's doing rehabilitation of housing as opposed to new housing.
So whose idea was Hands on Housing?
Well, it started about 10, 12 years ago by the people who are the heads of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. I'm very bad on names. I don't recall. Patrick Flood, I think, was one of them. And there were several ministers that were involved, but they were talking about the need for housing, for affordable housing in Austin. And 10 years ago, Austin was a fairly inexpensive place to live in terms of housing. It is now, today, the most expensive housing market in the state. And our salaries in East Austin particularly haven't gone up commensurate with the property values and the cost of housing. So while they may have gone up some, if they've gone up this much, the housing has gone up this much. It's a little hard to move up or even maintain the place you have when you're on that kind of a limited budget.
Rehabilitation then not only of housing, but of families and of entire neighborhoods.
Exactly. Our main purpose, again, in Austin Metropolitan Ministries, being that it's sort of the local version of the World Council of Churches, we're trying to bring everybody of every faith-based organization together, regardless of what they believe in, bring them together to do good in the community, to put their faith in action. It's like the old "put your money where your mouth is." Let's put your faith where your heart is, and let's get your hands operational, and let's get volunteers out, and let's do things that matter.
Well, now, Hugh, you're a musician.
That's correct, I am.
So
don't tell my parents, but that's okay. Okay.
So housing? How did you get into the housing business?
It's an interesting story. I retired from the University School of Music the 1st of March this year, having spent 30 years over there, and thought it was time to do something else. My wife and I decided we wanted to live in the hill country, which we've always really thought about as being heaven some way. So we bought ourselves a 5-acre lot outside Dripping Springs, and this spring we built a house. We just moved in about 2 weeks ago. And I learned a whole lot about housing and subcontractors and the joys of, when they don't show up in the right order and stuff like that. So I learned, I got a lot of hands-on experience with the house building situation through the course of this work this spring. We took our minister, Jim, out to see the house about 2 months ago and just wanted to show him where we were and stuff, because my wife, Kay, plays piano for the early church service at Terrytown United Methodist Church. So we're intending to commute in every Sunday morning to go to that service for Kay to still play. We're not going to switch churches or something. So Jim, having looked at the house and seen what we'd done, said, are you thinking about getting a job now that you're retired? I said, well, I thought I might consider something. He said, let's have lunch next Tuesday. At which time he introduced me to Susan Wills and suggested I apply, suggested is a very soft word here, suggested I apply for the head of the Hands on Housing organization. So Jim is an impossible person to say no to, as you probably know. So I said, oh, okay, I'll put my application in, thinking that with my background, I can play a heck of an electric bass, and I can hammer, but not necessarily in the right direction. So what am I going to do about housing? Well, I got the gig. And it's sort of like the dog chasing a car down the street. What does he do when he catches it? Well, I've caught this one, and now I've got to figure out what to do with it. Luckily, I have a wonderful associate. He's the other coordinator with me. His name's Alberto Valadares. And Alberto has been with the organization as a volunteer for the last entire year. And he knows the program backwards and forwards. He's met all the people. He knows the volunteers. He knows the ins and out of the city stuff. The man is a genius. I love working with Alberto. And with him there to handle the nuts and bolts of the everyday operation, to take care of the volunteers, to keep the list of houses, to handle all this stuff, that frees me to go out and try to spread the word about what we're trying to do and interest people in volunteering, interest people in making some financial donations perhaps, or at least keeping us in their prayers. And my intention is to meet 3 new people or organizations every week and make some kind of presentation about this.
You're surprised to find yourself here.
I'm real surprised that this is not the place I expected to be at this point in my life.
And this is a faith-based organization. So where do you see the intersection between what you're doing for pay and your faith?
Ooh, good question. I'm not getting paid a heck of a lot as a coordinator for Hands on Housing. I do have a small retirement from the university, so I can afford to make the payments on my new house that I just bought. But what I'm doing now is what my heart and my soul want me to do. I can go to work. I had this wonderful experience 3 weeks ago at the first staff meeting I went to. We opened a staff meeting with a prayer. Now, I've worked for 30 years for the state, and we never did that, of course. You know, it's illegal, I think. But what a wonderful way to start a staff meeting, because it sets the mood and the minds of the people there for what the task at hand is. And I just love that. I have not always been the most active and functioning Christian. At times I've been known to worship at the Church of the Inner Spring on Sunday mornings. But about 6 years ago, I was not dragged kicking and screaming, but was enticed to go on an Emmaus walk. My wife had gone 2 weeks before, and she had signed me up. So I went, just saying, well, we'll see what happens. And what happened was a major turnaround in my life. I'm now on my 3rd team as a musician, coming up on a walk about 2 weeks after our weekend in September with the Hands on Housing.
We ought to be careful then what we say yes to.
Amen.
Amazing where we find our faith dragging us, right?
But when you listen with your soul and your heart, you may be surprised where you wind up, but it's usually the right place.
Always, always. So talk a little bit more, since we have a few more minutes here, more about the September 9th event, and make sure that you issue your plea for what Hands on Housing needs.
What Hands on Housing needs for the September 9th Raise the Roof program is a number of volunteers. We already have a few hundred, but it takes about 20 volunteers per home, and we're hoping to do 40 to 50 homes. And we're looking at 1,000 volunteers. And it's good if we have those volunteers in advance of the day. If you want to come down on the 9th and just show up, we'll put you to work. But it'd be easier for our organization if we know in advance who's coming. So if you can call Alberto Valadares at the Hands on Housing, and their phone number is
7627.
Thank you, 7627.
The AMM number, correct.
I don't call myself very often, so. But if you can call Alberto at that phone number, he can arrange to take the information for you and make sure that you're set up on a team to go there. You can bring your own team, get your whole knitting club or whatever to come out. We certainly don't discriminate on the basis of gender, or anything else. We don't turn down little old ladies with hammers. So y'all come on out, we'll have a good time. So we need volunteers. We need over 1,000 volunteers for that day. We need equipment, which means we really need money, because if you just send us your used lumber, it may take more time fixing it up where we can use it than by putting it in place. It's easier for us to go buy the stuff somewhere. And we need your prayers as much as anything else. If you can keep Austin Metropolitan Ministries and the Hands on Housing people and your own church, your own faith organization that you're involved with, if you can keep those things in your prayers on a daily basis, we'll all be better off.
Where would you like to see Hands on Housing be in another 2, 3, 4 years?
I'd like to see it be doing what it's doing now on a somewhat expanded basis. Wouldn't it be nice to have a group go out every Saturday, every Sunday? We can't restrict it to Saturdays because we have some faith-based groups that's their Sabbath. They need to come work on Sunday. And that's bothered me a little bit, that my first opportunity to do things, because of the city involvement, it's set for only one day. Our event in the spring, we do at least 2 days. And we do things on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because some of the markets here in town, some of the places that sell building materials, provide us not only with donated materials, but some of their employees as volunteers. But they can't do it on Saturday. That's their big money day. So great, y'all come out on Tuesday. We'll work with you. I'd like to see this happening year-round with a couple of big pushes, spring and fall, but every weekend some housing being rehabilitated.
And where do you think you will be in 2, 3, 4 years in Hands on Housing?
Let's see where Jim Mayfield is. He may drag me somewhere else. I really hope to stay with this organization for quite a while.
And it sounds as if you're a good evangelist, shall we say, for the program.
But if I believe in a program, I can be an evangelist for it. I could never sell something I didn't believe in. But Hands on Housing and the power of prayer and the power of what we can do as a community, I really, really believe in. And I know that a lot of other folks do, and maybe they just need the right phone number to call.
And the number again? Let's see.
472 something or other. 7627?
That's right.
472-7627.
Okay. So we want any and everybody to call,
Mm-hmm.
to show up, to bring their money,
Yeah,
their prayers, to let you know ahead of time that they're coming. Do I have it all?
that's it. And then let's go out and make a bunch of people happy. The volunteers, the people, our clients that we're doing the houses for, everybody wins.
You're right. Thank you, Hugh. And we'll have to have you all back then after the Raise the Roof event to show us some more before and after pictures and, talk about the difference that we're really making in some of Austin's needy neighborhoods.
We'd love to do that. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you for joining us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you again next week.